So, the Nikon ZR. This is a camera that I feel like has really sort of shaken up the industry, and I really wanted to talk about this camera and kind of what Nikon will potentially or could potentially do in the future. They could actually go a couple of ways with this, and let me explain. So the reason why I think the Nikon ZR is a very important camera for the camera industry is obviously the value proposition. Like, it's $2,200 US. It can do the R3D NE RAW internal. It's got NRAW, ProRes RAW. This is all recording internally into the camera. Then you have that large, bright 4-inch back screen that pretty much no one's really doing except for those older Blackmagic pocket cameras. Then you also have the 32-bit float internal into the camera itself. It's kind of the first camera of its kind to get that. You know, the GH7 and the S1 II and the S1R2 have to use a top handle to be able to get the 32-bit float internal into the camera. But this is all through, you know, the camera with the shotgun microphone on the top, or the internal microphones, or the 3.5 audio jack, which I think every camera should have. Nikon are really pushing the limits of what they can actually do in such a small body. But that's kind of one thing that really gets this discussion going, is that will they release a camera that's in a slightly larger, ergonomically friendly body? Or will they actually release that Z8 or Z9 sensor literally in the same style body, just to have an 8K resolution style sensor as opposed to the 24.5 megapixel 6K resolution sensor? And this kind of got me thinking. It's like Nikon could go two ways with this. They could literally just grab that Z8 sensor, throw it into the Nikon ZR, and have that 8K version. Then you've got the 8K and 6K sort of side by side. It could be A cam, B cam. It could even be a B cam and C cam to red cameras, because you have that R3D codec that's pretty much the exact same color science as the red cameras. But then Nikon could go a completely separate direction and have more of a pro version of the Nikon ZR. Now, obviously the pro version would have more professional features. It could potentially have a removable EVF. It could obviously have a full-size HDMI, dual card slots. It could have the traffic light system that we do see in the red cameras. It could even have false color. There's a whole bunch of different features that they could literally throw in this camera for a pro version, which could be a potential thing, because it does seem like Nikon have been sort of planning this for a very long time. Since they kind of acquired Red a couple of years ago, it does feel like they just really wanted to have like a really stills hybrid orientated Nikon. They wanted to keep Red as they are, to be the higher end cinema, and they kind of wanted to bridge the gap with the Nikon ZR system. And this is where I feel like Nikon's in a really, really good position right now, because of releasing the ZR for $2,200 US. This puts them in a really good spot if they grab that 8K sensor, put it into that body, and have another camera that's literally like $3,000. That gives you that ability to do 8K in that. But then you have a pro version that could potentially come out and could be within that price of, you know, $3,500 to $3,800, which we do see. You know, the Canon C50, we've got the FX3 that are kind of around that $4,000 price range. This is where that pro version could kind of sit. And that pro version could be Nikon's best selling camera in the video industry. And they're kind of setting themselves up in that kind of direction, because I did a review of that Nikon power zoom lens, which is a video first lens. Fantastic image quality. I did use it on the Z8 and the Z6 Mark III when that actually came. I'll link that one in the description below so you guys can check that video out. But it does seem like they were trying to prep people for a whole bunch of video cameras coming their way. And this is one thing where they don't really have to be careful, because red cameras on their own are a whole different level. They're on a cinema level because of the form factor they're in. They're box style cameras. They've got the name in the cinema industry. So they don't really have to protect that range. They can literally trickle down a lot of that technology into a Nikon ZR style body. And this is where I personally believe the Nikon ZR is just that entry into the ZR sort of system. And the way I think about the Nikon ZR line is kind of like Sony's FX line. You know, you have the FX30, FX2, FX3, FX6, FX9 is kind of within that sort of FX sort of style body, which is within the Cine line. But then you also have the Burano, the Venice 2, and the original Venice. But in terms of the FX line, Sony kind of give you a whole bunch of different sensors and a very similar style body. body. You know, that's obviously the FX30, FX2, and FX3. They all have 3 different styles of sensors. Obviously, the FX6 and FX9 are slightly different form factors, which, like I said, could be a potential for Nikon to kind of tap into to do a very similar process and have an FX6 sort of style body with the Nikon ZR sort of ecosystem. And then, you know, if they do a slightly larger body and a more professional style body, this is where they could add, you know, the SDI inputs, full-size HDMI, false color, a whole bunch of professional inputs directly into that, and obviously like full-size XLR inputs as well. And in my opinion, it's definitely not outside the realm of this actually happening. I do feel like in 2026, we could potentially get something that is like the ZR in a professional body, or like I said, just that 8K sensor in the identical body. But I feel like one of the great things about Nikon at the moment is they do offer a lot of firmware updates to their older style bodies and continuously give a whole bunch of features. So the Nikon ZR pretty much hasn't been released in terms of, you know, getting into our hands, into users' hands. It's been pre-released. I've obviously had the pleasure to use it in a couple of different situations. I love it. That's why I'm getting one. It's a fantastic camera, but I do feel like it's just that sort of stepping stone and the foundations of what Nikon are potentially going to do in this kind of ZR lineup. And definitely, if we keep asking for a whole bunch of different features and just keep asking, they're potentially going to be giving us some of these features like open gate. They really need to produce open gate. Every camera manufacturer is bringing open gate into their cameras, except for Sony and except for Nikon. And as a Sony shooter predominantly, that really annoys me because I do a ton of social media work. You can go obviously onto my Instagram. I've literally been posting a lot of my Instagram reels in this orientation. So I'll shoot in horizontal, then I'll just sort of flip the image 90 degrees and just force people to watch it that way. But sometimes I just want to be able to crop the 9x16 format out of a 3x2 sensor and still have, you know, decent amount of headroom with the same framing. So I do have the ability to use, you know, your 16x9 3x2, but then also just a different format. So I really hope that Nikon do give us an update for OpenGate. And then I know a lot of people have been asking for the traffic light system that we do see in the Red cameras. I really like that traffic light system that was in my Red Komodo X. Fantastic for exposure. But for me personally, like, waveforms are my personal favorite when it comes to exposure because it stays on the screen the whole time. I can literally just look at it and I don't have to open up false color. I don't have to open up the traffic light system. But I knew the traffic light system kind of on there the whole time, which was really cool. I don't know how they could potentially implement that, but it's a large 4-inch screen, so there's definitely a ton of space on there. But these kind of updates would be amazing to see in this camera. Now look, don't get me wrong, the Nikon ZR is a fantastic camera and definitely could be an A camera for a lot of people. Majority of the time, the image will look pretty much identical throughout so many different cameras. Obviously there's, you know, bits and pieces here that would look better here, would look better there, but it mainly comes down to just the workflow and having a very particular camera with a few features that would suit your particular workflow. Like the larger screen allows you to have a smaller camera because you don't need a top screen, because you don't actually need an external monitor. And that's definitely one of the biggest reasons why they put the larger screen on there. So you don't have to have that external monitor. And that's definitely the reason why they have a micro HDMI as well. And also another cool feature that would be amazing to see is obviously SSD recording. So just plug in an SSD directly into that USB-C, and then that will give us the ability to record all those really large raw file sizes, because R3D NE-RAW and NRAW are really high file sizes. But then if you look at the ProRes RAW, it's insane. But if we had that ability to offload it directly onto an SSD, it would just make our lives so much easier. For me personally, one thing I would love to see in the Nikon ZR in a firmware update is just them fixing that H.265 codec. It's a little bit too compressed for my liking. There's too much noise reduction. Just give us a bit more control over that noise. So if we do want a less plastic sort of style look and a little bit more noise to the sensor, that's perfectly fine. I don't mind that at all. Just so I don't have fully smoothed out and slightly softened image. You know, that gives us users more control in that. But I know a lot of people are going to say, That's what the RAW codec's for. You know, there's zero noise reduction done in the R3D and RAW and ProRes RAW as well, so you can actually utilize that. But it's just the file sizes are absolutely insane. I love that H.265 because it's a really small file size with decent image quality, and for social media and YouTube work, it's perfectly fine. I just don't want it to be too smooth and too soft. You know, just give me a little bit more control. But honestly, let me know your thoughts in below. Do you think Nikon are going to have that 8K sensor and throw it in the same body? Do you think there's going to be a pro version of this, like an FX6 sort of style body, larger with more professional inputs? I feel like Nikon are in that teething stage, and it's a really good position for them to just go absolute ham, go all out, and give us absolutely everything in a whole bunch of different bodies, which is what I would like to see. Anyway, my friends, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.